What do I like to see, going into a cinema? I like, to have an elevated food and beverage offer, maybe have a slice of pizza and bring that to my seat, maybe have a pint of Guinness if you're in Ireland and or ale if you're in England, or and bring that to your seat, and not have it in. There's all these like small little details that we see as well, that not having it in a plastic glass, for instance, have it in a proper pint glass, or
It makes
have it
such a
in.
difference. I don't want to
Yeah,
walk into
and
a bar or
yeah,
a pub and have
exactly.
a pint in a plastic glass
Yeah, so
ever.
so exactly. So let's try not to compromise in those things.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria from Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. And in this week's episode, we are speaking with Paul John Anderson, the director of the Omniplex Cinema Group, the leading cinema circuit out of Ireland, which also has locations in Northern Ireland, England, and Scotland. We talk about their expansion to England and Scotland specifically, where they are opening new theaters with new concepts, some interesting renovations in the cities of Wigan and Birmingham that we're going to be covering in the second half of the episode, in a segment brought to you by our colleagues at Boost by Box Office. But before then, our regular panel segment coming up here with the top industry news, highlights from the week, and a little bit of box office forecasting. Joining us once again is Russ Fischer from the Box Office Studios, Rebecca Pahle, and Chad Kennerk from Box Office Pro. So guys, let's hop right into it because a lot to cover in this week's episode. Just off the bat, we've heard some updates, more details coming up from this John Voight plan to save cinemas. Now we've got the MPA with a number of guilds and unions from the industry coming in, sharing reactions. We shared our off-the-cuff impressions of what we knew in last week's episode, but to our listeners, this is evolving in a daily basis. So just a heads up, this story on the potential tariffs or incentives, we don't know yet, coming to Hollywood is going to be covered as soon as we have something solid to report. As soon as we can tell you, this is what's happening, this is our analysis of it, that's when we're going to get back into the topic. For anyone curious as to our questions and reactions, last week's episode contains everything you want on that end. Other than that, sit tight. We'll cover everything that we can talk about confidently here, guys, because as we found out from the China-US tariffs this week, even things that we think are going to happen now have surprise 90-day pauses coming up.
Yeah, at this point, I think speculating as you record on Tuesday for something that comes out on Thursday would be borderline irresponsible. So it's such a nebulous situation right now. We're all still waiting to see how it shakes out, just like the rest of you.
So let's talk about something that we have a better footing on, which is movies we've seen recently. Rebecca, Pahle, we've both seen Friendship. The movie had a fantastic platform opening week over in 6 locations last weekend. What were your reactions to the Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd A24 comedy?
It was great. I went with my boyfriend and a mutual friend of ours on Thursday at the Lincoln Square AMC. It was a packed house. You could definitely tell that it was people who were already familiar with his work, which makes sense, that they would be there on opening day. But the crowd loved it. I like his Netflix show. I think he should leave. Not as much as my boyfriend and our friend. So I think I was surprised at the level to which this was an event. Like, this was the first time my friend had been to a movie theater in over a year. Definitely curious about that wide expansion. It seems like the sort of thing where I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean it in a positive way, but it feels like a movie where that cinema score might be low once it hits wide audiences.
That's a good way of putting it. But, very much part of the Tim Robinson brand as a comedian. I'm not kidding when I say there's a lot of the cable guy in this movie, in that it's the sort of niche comedy that has a little bit of a wider appeal than you think it does, but I'm not sure wide audiences will embrace that exactly. Also reminds me of some of the movies that Tom Green did. Russ, you probably were there in like professional covering age when that Tom Green career exploded in a similar manner as a niche comedian, but that wide audience wasn't really there for that type of comedy.
Not in the same way, no. And it didn't have like the benefit of like the label backing that friendship has. Like there's a degree of piggybacking that this movie gets just on the sense of like who's releasing it.
No, I think that's a good point, especially that A24 backing, which is this like curatorial stamp of quality. Although I do think that's been under a stress as A24 increases its output here theatrically.
It's true. And Neon has kind of picked up where A24 was 3 years ago, and some of that is just in the way that they do their marketing. But still, there's a lot of, for a certain audience segment, there's a lot of value to that A24 brand and the Tim Robinson thing. It's impossible to discount the degree to which I Think You Should Leave has become sort of a common lexicon for a whole group of people. And like
I feel like I know sarcastic men in their 40s, like much like I feel like I know them on a deeper level now.
Yes.
Yes.
So, those things all combine, like those are all funneling little kind of niche audiences into this movie, but you put them all together and, it's not insignificant.
No, not at all. And we saw that from that opening weekend. Only 6 screens, but still managed to pull in $451,000 for a per screen average of $75,000 plus. Great result. It'll continue expanding through Memorial Day weekend. And of course, we talk about Memorial Day weekend. We're talking also about Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. Review embargo is up. Chad Kennerk and I both went to the all medias, and I think we had a similar reaction to the film, Chad.
We both said very similar things. It delivers as a mission movie. It's great entertainment. There's a lot of exposition there. I wish there wasn't that much, because as a mission fan, it's things I already know and things that I think that the audience that hasn't maybe seen the last installment could catch up on or doesn't need to know the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. They don't need to know. We don't need, a little bit less focus on story, a little bit more focus on character, I think could have helped the film just a tad bit more, because the benchmark is very high when we talk about these films. So this by no means implies that either Chad or I were disappointed by the film. It has 2 of the best set pieces you're going to see on premium format all year. Wonderful second half of the film. A first hour that could be trimmed down to 20, maybe 30 minutes for a tighter running time. I don't think this is a movie that needs to be 3 hours, especially since it's a movie split in 2. The part 2 part of this title was abandoned, but it very much still feels like a continuation of Dead Reckoning Part 1, doesn't it, Chad?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's picking up where the story left off, but giving the audience that didn't see part 1 that extra 30 minutes to understand what's happening.
I saw part 1 and I forgot most of the plot details just because I did. And I feel like I'm ready to jump back in.
Yeah, there's evil AI. It's trying to end the world. Like, what more do you need?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, it made some stylistic choices with Dead Reckoning Part 1 that were very different from the couple of movies they had made before. Does that sort of thing continue in this chapter?
That's a really good question, Russ. Visually, I was surprised to find out it's actually the same cinematographer, and of course, obviously the same director, working on this title, because there does seem to be a change in just how the movie itself looks from what we saw a couple of years back in Dead Reckoning Part 1 and what we are going to see in Memorial Day weekend with Final Reckoning. I'm not sure how much of that was by design. These were movies that shot simultaneously a number of years now. If I'm not mistaken, I think, didn't these films shoot during the pandemic, Russ?
That's when they started. Yeah.
So
I mean, some of the footage that's in Final Reckoning goes back quite a ways at this point. And I don't know to what degree. I mean, I'm sure they reshot some of it, but there's probably stuff in this movie that was filmed in, 2021.
A while back. It doesn't seem dated, if that makes sense. It doesn't seem like this is a movie that's been in a can for a while, even though, as you mentioned, it has. A number of shots here most likely date back to the pre-pandemic era, right? But no, I think the film works cohesively as a whole, just as a single entity, but there are enough strands narratively here that connected back to Dead Reckoning Part 1. I'm not sure if that's an advantage. Honestly, I don't know how you feel about it, Chad. Could Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning been a really good 3.5 hour movie, or slightly better 2 hour long installments of the same rather than a 3-hour ending that we had with this one.
I think you needed 2 parts to do all of the amazing sequences that they wanted to get on film. I think they could have been shorter movies. I think this one could have been a really great 2-hour finale.
Yeah, I think that's also the structure of how these Macquarie films operate, where it takes a little while to get going, especially if you don't have an opening scene that delivers. I don't think this has an opening scene that delivers in the way that other films have. But once you get to the second half of the film, it's going to be maybe 2 set pieces that are like 45 minutes plus that are worth the admission price and that are going to keep you there, wishing that you hadn't bought the extra large soda. Because you're not going to move from your seat no matter what happens. So all in all, I do think audiences are going to be happy with what comes out. But again, the benchmark here, I think, is one that goes very, very high to fan expectations. Currently, we have the opening weekend range for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning around the $70 million mark for the 3-day. That could go as high as $100 million for the holiday weekend. This would be a franchise opening weekend record for The Final Reckoning. And once again, I do think word of mouth here is going to be positive. As a movie-going experience, it reminded me a lot of what I felt watching Alien Romulus last year, where you're going into a summer movie theater that's air-conditioned on a Saturday afternoon on a hot day, and you're going to have a really, really good afternoon. And then maybe you go out and grab a slice of pizza with friends afterwards. It's a great communal experience. And I think that's to the credit of Tom Cruise.
That's what I'm feeling like I'm looking forward to for Final Destination Bloodlines. Honestly, I've never been a huge into the Mission Impossible franchise, but just those big, bombastic summer crowd movies. It's 'tis the season.
Well, let's go into that because the forecasting range on Final Destination Bloodlines opening this weekend, guys, is just climbing by the day. Opening weekend for Final Destination Bloodlines might be higher than the lifetime gross of any individual Final Destination movies that preceded it.
I was initially going to get my tickets for IMAX, but the showtimes didn't work out, so we're doing Dolby. But I think this one having that premium footprint is definitely going to be a big boon for it. Because if, for example, if you're doing ANC stubs, it's all right, well, there's no extra fee to do the premium, so I'm going to do it. Though part of me wishes that I was doing it at a Regal theater for the 4DX of it, because I bet that movie would kill in 4DX, no pun intended.
There's a lot to be said for that premium format ticket bump with respect to forecasting on this too, because that's actually part of what drove the fourth movie, currently the highest opening weekend grosser in the series, to the number that it earned, because it was the first 3D movie in the series. It came out kind of at the height of the 3D boom. They had almost done the third movie in 3D, but then they did the fourth. The fourth was coming off the heels of the third, which is generally regarded as the best of the series so far. And it was in 3D, so you got a premium ticket bump right there. And it's ironic then that the fourth movie is, I think, inarguably the worst of the series. It's the one that now everybody will be like, oh yeah, the fourth one, it's terrible. But that 3D price bump that it got back in the day helped it out quite a bit.
And immersive for a movie like this, like Rebecca says, I think is going to be perfect. You've got those 4DX auditoriums through Regal, Cinemark with D-Box, Luma 4D, a great technology that is getting more and more theaters nationally and globally. That's also going to help the footprint of these motion seating experiences. These are the sort of movies that work really well with that immersive environment. And I can't wait to see the reaction on something like this after opening weekend.
And I think there's a lot to be said too for, we're coming into this having talked about Mission. And I think one of the things that Mission is struggling with right now is, as you say, kind of that, this one's got 30 minutes of exposition at the beginning that tells you what happened in the last movie that maybe you didn't see. The Mission movies have grown increasingly reliant on what happened before. Marvel has experienced the same thing. And the Final Destination movies have gone back and forth with how tightly connected they are. Some are more connected to past films than others. But the thing is, even the most tightly connected ones, it doesn't really matter if you've seen any of the old ones.
You could have a nice little button at the end to tie something into a previous film, but really, like, we're all there for the Rube Goldberg death set pieces, and there's not much more that you need lore-wise. It's nice and undemanding to to a summer audience like myself.
And in that regard, Rebecca, it's also similar to what Russ is saying to the Mission Impossible situation, where it's the set pieces that sell the film. And sometimes you forget which film is associated with which set piece. That happens to me a lot with these Final Destination movies. Just so many fond memories of these movies, but not really of individual movies in the franchise, if that makes sense.
There's a reason whole generations of people will not drive behind a log truck on a highway.
Oh, of course. Final
Like,
Destination
that's
2.
what it is.
That's the reason. Final Destination 2 is why if I'm driving, I see a truck transporting logs, I think certain death. Get out of the way.
I saw some image that there was like a marketing for this one, maybe, where someone had set up like a fake log truck.
They recreated. And that's, I think, an interesting thing about the marketing for this movie is that they're leaning as much on ideas from some of the previous movies as they are stuff that might be in the new one, which is kind of unusual, right? You don't see that all the time where it's like, oh, you're marketing this, sixth movie by
it's
driving
like, hey,
around
you
a
remember
truck
this franchise
from the movie 20 years ago? Yeah, it does work. It's honestly, it's a really good idea for a film like this. It works perfectly. You see that log truck, you pass it on the highway, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay.
It feels like getting kind of, I don't like Megan vibes in terms of like just leaning into the internet's fond feelings of
Sure.
whatever.
I mean,
that's a good shout. Yeah. But this is all potential we're talking about. So I want to be very clear to our listeners. These aren't expectations that we're placing on this movie. If this movie opens anywhere above 40 million, I think it will be a welcome surprise for an industry that didn't expect too much out of this. But the tracking has really been driving us to push this further and further up on the opening weekend basis. It will not be a disappointment if it doesn't hit these numbers, but we're just saying the figures that we're seeing both in pre-sales and awareness are very, very high.
I'm really waiting to see those demographics. That's what has me curious as to the age spread.
Yes. Yeah, no question.
So that is coming out on Friday. The other opener this weekend, which we don't expect it to make a very big splash in the box office, is starring The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega. Hurry Up Tomorrow. We saw footage of this at CinemaCon. Chad, I liked the concert that The Weeknd gave us after the Lionsgate presentation. I'm not sure I could surmise much from what we saw of this film.
Yeah, the concert was great. I am looking forward to seeing this film. I think it's maybe an interesting, creative take, and we'll see what it is. I do appreciate going into a movie sometimes and not really knowing what I'm going to get.
Hopefully it's a sequel to Uncut Gems. That's what I think is going to save this at the box office.
Adam Sandler.
No, right now we're expecting an opening weekend between 2 to 4 million on this. Definitely muted here. But I do think there is star power with The Weeknd where folks like myself say, hey, I like this guy's songs.
I mean, ditto Jenna Ortega. She's a very popular, actress, definitely more so among Gen Z audiences. But like we saw, granted, not only her star power, but Beetlejuice. I mean, that.
Yeah, she really helped drive that to great heights last year. That's our lineup of new wide releases coming up this weekend. Elsewhere in the industry, a great news story building on a topic that we hit last week on our podcast. If you remember last week's episode, we spoke about Cineplex up in Canada tackling a new discount day for its VIP movie theaters on Wednesdays, charging a regular price admission for VIP tickets. AMC Theaters now is following up with a new discount day of its own for its AMC Stubs members, and that means anyone in its loyalty program, whether it's paid or free. Chad, can you give us details on this new discount day that AMC is rolling out on July 9th?
Yeah, beginning Wednesday, July 9th, all AMC Stubs members, which includes the free Insider members, can enjoy 50% off the adult evening-based ticket price all day long on Wednesdays. So you're still going to have additional charges for the premium formats, but then 50% will be applied to the base ticket price for those formats as well. They did say that there are certain movies, some holiday time periods that may be excluded from the 50% off Wednesday program, but they're envisioning if this is successful, this is going to be a pricing initiative that will be available at all AMC theaters in the United States going forward.
And this is a major trend that is coming up. This is something that was discussed extensively at CinemaCon. Make sure that the price proposition to moviegoers is the right one. And especially as we're seeing right now, where inflation hasn't really let up considerably, where we're still seeing high prices coming out because of some tariffs out there, this is a budget-conscious consumer. And I'm really happy to see movie theaters say, hey, we've got that premium ticket that you know you're going to buy on opening weekend. For everybody else, we're going to give you options to make it easier for you to come to the movies. A crucial development, I think. We'll be following the success of that pricing initiative throughout the weeks this summer. But for now, let's go to our feature segment brought to you by our colleagues over at Boost by Box Office in our interview with Omniplex Cinema Group's Pahle John Anderson, coming up right after this break.
Imagine a world where your cinema's digital experience is as unforgettable as the movies you show. At Box Office, we strive to make that world a reality. We offer innovative solutions like custom-built websites, mobile apps, and user-friendly ticketing pages, crafted to meet the unique needs of cinemas. It's all about enhancing customer loyalty and making booking a breeze. Take your cinema's online experience to the next level with Boost. Contact us today at sales@boxoffice.com to learn more.
And we are back here on the Box Office Podcast with Omniplex's Pahle Anderson. Paul, welcome to the podcast. A lot to talk about here with the growth that the Irish-based exhibition circuit Omniplex has had over the past couple of years. To settle into the conversation, could you share with our listeners that may not be familiar with the Omniplex brand some of your history and background?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, absolutely. So the origins of Omniplex, if you want to take a step back, the Anderson family, obviously I'm a third generation in the cinema business. My grandfather, Kevin Anderson, started the business in the late 40s, early 50s on the outskirts of Dublin, opening his first cinema. Paul Sr., my dad, was the cashier at a tender, 8 years old at the time. I think so they got away with that at that time. But yeah, so we have a long history as a family in the exhibition business. Actually, my grandfather started out on the distribution side, first of all, and then acquired his first cinema in the mid-50s. During that period, acquired a lot of cinemas throughout Ireland, became quite a dominant cinema chain, a lot of single screen locations, in that kind of 60s, 70s, 80s. And my father was heavily involved and basically ran those cinemas at that time. And in the late 80s, early 90s, he spearheaded the kind of multiplex, revolution that happened around that time. And Omniplex was kind of born in the early 90s. And since then, we now have 44 locations dotted around the UK and Ireland with 356 screens in total. So I think we're the fourth largest, in the UK and Ireland exhibitor, and we've experienced some good growth over the last few years.
Now, it's an established brand for Irish audiences, but having a very well-established brand presence in one market, to going into a new one, not too far away, but definitely different, and reintroducing yourselves there.
On the island of Ireland, we're a very dominant cinema chain and one of the largest, if the largest cinema chain on the island of Ireland. Going into England and Scotland was kind of a new venture for us, and it was exciting establishing the brand into England and Scotland. To be honest, I found it quite refreshing, going into a market that was kind of unknown to us and we were unknown to the market. So it gave us an opportunity to establish, from a clean slate, exactly how we wanted the brand to be interpreted. And it gave us an opportunity to just try some new things. So we now have 7 locations, 6 in England and 1 in Scotland. We've been putting a lot of time and effort and resource into renovating those locations. So Wigan was our first site that we fully renovated, and it's doing phenomenally well. We're really happy with it. It's a 1,000-seater fully recline with some sofa beds, with some nice concepts with a Joe's food truck. So we have an Airstream food truck that we purpose-built for that space. 7 meters long. It was actually towed there on the road, so it is roadworthy. And we had to dismantle one section of the building to get it in. And it's doing really well. And we serve 24-inch pizzas. You can either buy a full pizza or you can buy it by the slice. We also serve hamburgers and chicken burgers and all that stuff. And we have obviously the traditional cinema fare with popcorn drinks, which is the king and queen of popcorn that we call it. That a Coke and a popcorn, so you can still get all your normal cinema snacks, but it's this nice added layer of F&B that we're kind of wrapping around our new sites and new site developments.
And it's also part of a brand identity when you reintroduce yourself to a new audience, because it's hard to stand out in this business. Everyone's playing the same films, so you really have to make sure that your experience is something unique, so people go to your cinema specifically for that experience. I wanted to ask you about that because we're looking at different key decision drivers for the consumer when it comes to their trip to the movies. You mentioned this unique F&B concept. What other offerings are you really leveraging on to make sure these new moviegoers in the UK select Omniplex over other brands?
I think we've started this journey, I suppose, leaning more into hospitality, than we would have ever before. Cinema was a fairly simple concept. You buy a cinema ticket and we had popcorn and soft drinks, as I mentioned. And I think we're trying a lot harder to elevate the experience, and I think elevate is a key word we've been using across, internally in the organization. How do we elevate the experience? How do we get better? How do we make the experience better for the customer? So, things that are driving, customers to us, and we opened up a different brand in Belfast, which really opened our eyes to the potential of high quality F&B. It's called the Avenue. So it's like a full food to seat offer. We've servers inside the screen. You can place your order and all that product will be dropped to your seat. So it's very different to a normal cinema environment. And even trying to explain that to customers, as they're stepping in the door was a challenge, So that opened our eyes to the potential of the F&B, and the spends, that you can get from that are significant. But on the flip side, the costs of operating that are significant. Labor costs are phenomenally expensive to do that food to seat offer, and it's very hard to scale that. So in the Avenue we've 540 seats, so it's probably on the larger side of a full food to seat offer. In England, where we have our Omniplex that we renovated, it's 1,000 seats. So it's double the size. It's not possible in our eyes to do a food to seat offer in that environment because you're dealing with just scale and volume. So our solution was, well, as we would normally do in the cinemas, the customer does a bit of the work. They go up to the counter, they get the food, and they bring it to the seats. So that's what we're trying to replicate, is that kind of multiplex environment with an elevated food and beverage offer, and having interesting spaces that people want to maybe lounge in. So we've converted the space that we put, our Airstream truck, we converted that whole space into a lounge. And even doing small things like making sure internally we're using these terms of a lounge. It's not a foyer anymore, it's a lounge. And getting our staff to refer to it, our employees to refer to it as a lounge. And they're explaining to customers as a lounge. And it becomes more integral to the operation then. We're seeing great things. People are coming out of screens, grabbing a slice of pizza, having a drink, maybe getting a pint or a cocktail, sitting in our lounge area. It's a nice, interesting environment. They can see the food truck there serving people. It's kind of busy, it's nice, but it's people aren't on top of you. So it's a nice just area to sit in, and we're just seeing good results. And it is early days. We've rolled that concept into another site in Birmingham, and that's quite successful as well. And we're moving that over into another site in Sunderland that we're currently renovating. So we're kind of going through site by site, finessing it, making it a little bit better, more efficient. Things that may be working, as we thought, we can change that into the next one, and so on and so forth. So it is an evolving process, but it is. We're definitely seeing it is, making us stand out, as well as a really nice cinema to attend.
It's a trend that I'm seeing globally, that the multiplex of the 1990s had a lobby that was very much designed for traffic flow. You come in, you buy your ticket at the box office as quickly as possible, move quickly through the concession stand, get to your seat, and just push as many people in and out of that auditorium as the showtimes go on. Now, that lounge concept that you're focusing on is popping up everywhere. And I think it's super smart in the sense that you're promoting audiences to not only linger, but to spend more with you. And you have those elevated food and beverage offers. You have those drink offers that now tell people the lobby space isn't something you walk past. It's something you stay in. It's something you discuss the film. Maybe you meet up there with your friends before the showtime starts. It's a great evolution in how modernizing the cinema concept is becoming over the past couple of years. There's been a lot of talk around things like reclining seating. AI is a big topic of conversation. Of course, premium formats. There's a lot of things for you guys to focus on as you plan out an expansion. How are you guys prioritizing what to spend your CapEx on? When you go into a building, you refurbish, you remodel, what's the first thing that you say, we need this as a must?
I suppose that there's not one specific thing. Like, it's a mix, and if we're looking at sites, we look at every location, as an individual location. And at the current time, there's so many opportunities that we're seeing, at this current time, we're in a good position to maybe, move on some of these opportunities. So we're probably saying no to more opportunities than we are saying yes, and that, from our point of view, we want, we're there for the long term. We want to invest a lot of capital into these locations and make sure they are really good and that customers enjoy it. If we can kind of get to the, our focus is on, what's the customer going to like? What are they going to enjoy? What's going to build more frequency? What's going to integrate with the community more as well? So if you can start at that point and kind of work back, and say, and even, I'd probably use my own experiences in, what do I like? What do I like to see, going into a cinema? I like, to have an elevated food and beverage offer, maybe have a slice of pizza and bring that to my seat, maybe have a pint of Guinness if you're in Ireland, or ale if you're in England, and bring that to your seat, and not have it in. There's all these like small little details that we see as well, that not having it in a plastic glass, for instance, have it in a proper pint glass, or
it makes such a difference. I don't want to walk into a bar or a pub and have a pint in a plastic glass ever.
So exactly. So let's try not to compromise in those things. Have it like you're in a restaurant or like in a bar. I see a lot and there's some exhibitors out there who are really innovative, at the moment in the UK and Ireland and further afield. And there's some that, maybe open up a bar, and I would call it like a cinema bar. It's like plastic glasses, it's a bar, but it's not a bar, and it's, so those small details, and we really get into the nitty gritty, into those details. We've great team around us, F&B team as well, that we've expanded, and we kind of talk about these things and talk about, what does that feel like, as a customer going in, and we're really leveraging our customer feedback as well. We one of our key internal metrics is NPS scores, so we grade all of our sites, on NPS. We see all of the feedback that customers give us, and while you take a lot of it with a pinch of salt, it does give you, nice direction. If you're going the right direction, it gives you a nice pointers that is good. Or on the flip side, if we're doing something wrong, customers will let us know, and they're pretty vocal. With some loyal customers out there who tell us if we're doing something wrong, they'll let us know about it.
And that's a great point you bring up that I want to focus on a little bit. The feedback you're getting from consumers is part of a larger trend around data analytics and making decisions based on data from your consumers. How are you integrating aspects like digital ticketing, loyalty programs, even just showtime discovery into how you're making programming decisions and even expansion decisions? As you're going into UK, you really want to make sure you're hitting the right sites in the right markets for yourselves.
Yeah, we dive into all of the data, our analytics massively. If anything, you could be draining in data, and you need to be careful that you don't go down rabbit holes, and you're no wiser. You're probably asking more questions at the end of it. So data is really important, but probably good data is more important, and seeing where things are working well and the data shows that, and maybe expanding an element, of something that you're doing. So yeah, like, our website is critical, our showtimes displayed on Google are critical, our whole customer journey is fundamental as well, from when they discover our website, our showtimes, that flow through the booking journey, receiving that confirmation email, being able to store that on their Apple Wallet, being able to present that at the ticket check, with very seamlessly, trying to sell concessions online, being able to arrive at the counter, scan that, do that seamlessly. And then once they've left the building, we want to contact them and say, did you enjoy the experience? Or do you have any feedback for us? So that whole customer journey is kind of critical to us as well, and making sure customers are happy, and that they leave the premises happy. And if they don't, leave the premises happy, we want to know about it and try and understand why not and fix that.
And a big part of this expansion is understanding that even though you have this great experience in the Irish market, you're coming in very humbly in the UK as a learning experience as well. Could you share with us some of those differences between the UK and Ireland when it comes to motion picture exhibition?
Yeah, I'd say as we're going into any new project, be it in Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, we're always trying to learn, as to what are the demographics of that location. And what we do see, in England and Scotland, while we've been operating now for 18 months, coming on kind of 2 years. It's the same but different. There are certain locations that the demographic makeup is far more multicultural than we would be, used to. We see a lot of demand for Indian content films, for instance, and we would have some knowledge of scheduling Indian content films as an example, but it really opened our eyes to the potential, of that in certain locations, in England. So that's just an example. We're also seeing kind of, I suppose, getting into minute detail, but like customers like to go earlier to the cinema in England for some reason, it's a cultural thing maybe. But like, as an example, we opened Minecraft at 9 a.m. In one of our cinemas in Birmingham, and the first show of the day sold out. And we would not be opening up cinemas in Ireland or Northern Ireland at 9 a.m. I pretty much guarantee you there'd be no one showing up. So there's just small, differences, and that does have knock-on effects on the cost of operation as well, because it widens your opening hours. So your opening hours are gone from maybe 10 hours up to 15, 16 hours. And that has knock-on effect of wages and utilities and so on and so forth. So it's all these kind of small nuanced differences, and we try to learn what customers want and what they respond to at site level, and take a lot of feedback from our managers at site level, a lot of our staff at site level, and try and just make those locations as successful as possible, and build frequency, through those locations.
And that's key, right? Making sure that those locations become community hubs for people to return to frequently. Part of where we are right now in this industry is, I think there is a push to modernization, to upgrades, but maybe the capex isn't there, isn't as viable or is really attainable as it should be or as it could be. Where do you think this industry's headed once that capex opens up a little bit more and exhibitors can pursue innovations kind of like the ones you're prioritizing on right now with expanded food and beverage?
From our point of view in relation to capex, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, we've kind of been doing the same thing, same things we've always done. We always trying to innovate. Every site that we open, we always trying to make it a little bit better and improve it every time. So we haven't really changed our kind of capex pre and post-pandemic. Other operators that maybe had slightly higher leverage, a lot of debt and maybe very high rents, are in a different position. And when does that all come about? I think those larger operators, there needs to be a stabilizing of the business, to a point that a lot of those legacy leases are still lingering around. And that is going to cut any potential investment into those locations. So there's some of those bigger operators are carrying very substantial leases, and they're stuck with those until they restructure or, whatever. So I would love to see the industry kind of move on from pre-COVID, post-COVID, narrative. I think you've looked in UK and Ireland, box office has been kind of floating around 900 million, billion kind of mark for the last 2 years, 3 years. So I think that is the new normal. And I think, we try and grow the business from there as an industry, by investing, being more innovative. But if you have those larger operators kind of still dealing with those issues that they're facing, more of a balance sheet issue, they're kind of stuck for capex, So I think there needs to be kind of possibly there may be a bit of restructuring, going on to free up that capex. But we're really positive, on the industry going forward. Customers are still going to the cinema, which is a good thing, and we just want them to come more often. And I think creating nice environments, creating exciting environments, being innovative as an exhibitor, we are seeing great results, and we're seeing our business is improving massively with that capex. So so from our point of view, really positive. As an industry, it's a bit of a mixed bag, at the moment.
Yeah, I think definitely something that's poised to change in the coming years, but it's great to see Omniplex grow. It is currently the 13th largest circuit in all of Europe. Congratulations for all your success,
Thank you.
Paul.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And a big thank you to Paul John Anderson for joining us here on the Box Office Podcast. Earlier, you heard from my colleagues Russ Fischer, Rebecca Pahle, and Chad Kennerk. We'll be back with a new episode of the podcast next week, so don't forget to tune in. New episodes come out every Thursday. Thanks for listening, and have a good time at the movies.